there's a boatload of different ETFs out there in the market, making it challenging to sort through what's good and what isn't. And in this video, I'll be ranking the most popular dividend ETFs to help you decide what fund you might want to add to your portfolio. This video is for educational purposes only. This is not financial advice, and I'm not a financial advisor. All investments carry risks, so always be sure to do your own research. The first ETF is going to be cgdv, the Capital Group Dividend Value ETF. This is an actively managed fund that's focused on companies that pay dividends or have the potential to pay dividends, and the managers aim to generate income that's higher than the average yield of the S&P 500. The portfolio of cgdv currently contains 53 holdings in total, and the top holdings are in companies like Microsoft, Nvidia, RTX, Broadcom, Eli Lilly, and more. And the sectors is mostly exposed to are technology, industrials, healthcare, and consumer discretionary, so it has a pretty mixed blend of growth and value stocks. For the dividends, it has a dividend yield of 1.32%, which is paid out quarterly. And it's had 3 years of consecutive dividend payments and dividend growth, and that's since it was created in 2022. cgdv also has an expense ratio of 0.33%, costing you $33 for every $10,000 invested. For the performance, it's had 1-year returns of under 21% and annual returns of about 16% since it was created 4 years ago in 2022. Moving to the ranking, I'm going to be ranking cgdv under good. I think it's a solid fund with a nice mix of growth and value dividend companies that offers great returns. But keep in mind, this fund aims to have a higher yield than the S&P 500, which compared to many other dividend ETFs is pretty low. So expect more growth potential and lower dividends with a fund like this. The next ETF is dgro, the iShares Core Dividend Growth ETF. This fund tracks the Morningstar US Dividend Growth Index, which invests in stocks with a track record of consistently growing their dividends. These companies must have at least 5 years of consecutive dividend growth and a dividend payout ratio of less than 75%. It also excludes the top 10% highest yielding stocks, and it excludes REITs or real estate investment trusts. As for dgro's portfolio, it holds around 395 stocks, with top holdings including names like Exxon, JP Morgan Chase, Apple, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, and more. With sector exposure and financials up top, technology, healthcare, industrials, and a few others, making it value tilted, but it does have exposure to some growthier companies. dgro comes with a dividend yield of 2%, which is paid out quarterly. It also has 11 years of consecutive dividend payments and dividend growth, along with a 5-year dividend growth rate of 7%, which is nice to see. And dgro has an expense ratio of 0.08%, costing you $8 per $10,000 invested. For the returns, it's had 5-year annual returns of 12.8%, and returns of 14% annually over the past 10 years. Shifting to the ranking, I have no choice but to put dgro at the top as one of the best dividend funds. This fund offers a variety of stocks with a mix of both value and growth, along with a great history of dividends, dividend growth, and appreciation. It's hard to go wrong with this one. Third up, we have VYM, the Vanguard High Dividend Yield ETF. This fund tracks the FTSE High Dividend Yield Index, which is made up of companies that are expected to have above average dividend yields. It filters through companies based on their 12-month projected dividend yield and removes ones that don't pay dividends or aren't expected to pay in the next 12 months. There's a few other filters, and the stocks in the top 55% in dividend yield are selected. For VYM's portfolio, it holds 559 stocks, and its top holdings include Broadcom, JP Morgan Chase, Exxon, Walmart, and others. The sectors it's exposed to are financials, industrials, healthcare, technology, and a few more. So a diverse spread of stocks and sectors, and the top holdings don't make up a big chunk of the fund, which is a nice plus. For the dividends, VYM has a dividend yield of 2.3%, which is paid out quarterly. This fund has 19 years of consecutive dividend payments and 15 years of consecutive dividend growth, along with the 5-year dividend growth rate of 3.15%, which is a pretty solid track record. And it comes with an expense ratio of 0.04%, costing you $4 yearly per $10,000 invested. For the performance, VYM has 5-year annual returns of 11% and 10-year annual returns of 11.2%, which is good for a dividend fund. This leads me to putting VYM in the best category. The reason is that it's so well diversified across stocks and sectors, it has great returns, and a pretty long history of providing consistent returns and dividends. Next, we have SDY, which is the State Street Spider S&P Dividend ETF. This fund tracks the S&P High Yield Dividend Aristocrats Index, which invests in companies in the S&P 1500 index that have consistently increased their dividends for at least 20 years. And the screening considers stocks with 20 years of consecutive dividend growth, a market cap of at least $2 billion, and a 3-month average daily trading volume of $5 million. And SDY's portfolio currently has 155 holdings, with the top holdings in stocks like Verizon, Realty Income, Chevron, Pepsi, and a few others, while the sector exposure leans mostly into industrials, consumer staples, utilities, and financials, making this a pretty defensive and value-oriented fund. Getting to the income, SDY has a dividend yield of 2.5%, and that's paid out quarterly. And the fund has 18 years of consecutive dividend payments, 3 years of dividend growth, and a 5-year dividend growth rate of 3.1%. And the expense ratio is a little bit on the higher end at 0.35%, costing you $35 for every $10,000 invested. And SDY has had 5-year annual returns of about 10%, and returns of around 11% over the last 10 years. While this fund does have some pretty good holdings, I'm going to have to give this one a pass. This fund is on the higher end of fees, and for a passive dividend fund, I just don't see the benefit of paying that additional cost. The dividend metrics and performance aren't that great compared to some other funds, and it's not like you're trading growth potential for more diversification since it only has just 155 holdings. All I'm saying is I believe there are better options out there. Up next is VIG, the Vanguard Dividend Appreciation ETF. This fund tracks the S&P US Dividend Growers Index and it invests in companies with a history of consistently increasing their dividends. These companies must have increased their dividends for the last 10 years, and the index excludes the top 25% highest yielding companies from the index. So it focuses on companies that are established with sustainable dividend growth. For the portfolio, VIG currently holds 338 stocks, with its top holdings in companies like Broadcom, Apple, Eli Lilly, Microsoft, Visa, and others. And its sector exposure is mostly technology, financials, healthcare, and industrials. This is a blended fund, but unlike the previous ETFs, this one is giving you more exposure to the tech sector. Now, for the dividends, VIG has a dividend yield of 1.5%, which is paid out quarterly. And this is on the lower end, but keep in mind the type of stocks that it holds. But it makes it up with 19 years of consecutive dividend payments, 12 years of consecutive dividend growth, and a 5-year dividend growth rate of 8.1%. And for the fees, VIG has an expense ratio of 0.04%, costing you $4 per 10K invested. And in terms of performance, it has 5-year annual returns of about 10% and annual returns of 12.3% over the last 10 years. This one is an easy one to rank. I'm going to have to put it in the best category. The dividend yield of VIG is on the lower end, but this fund is focused on stocks with strong historical dividend growth. Not only that, but it also gives you some added tech exposure that you don't normally find in dividend ETFs. So you're getting much more growth potential, strong and consistent dividend growth, and a great mix of value and growth holdings with a tech tilt. At number 6, we have schd, the State Street Spider Portfolio S&P 500 High Dividend ETF. This fund tracks the S&P 500 High Dividend Index, which is made up of 80 high-yield companies within the S&P 500. This index is pretty straightforward as it chooses stocks that have an indicated annual dividend yield or forward dividend yield that's greater than 0, and it filters the top-ranked stocks. Currently, schd contains 80 stocks in total in its portfolio. And the top holdings have names like APA, LyondellBasell, Dow, EOG Resources, Verizon, and Chevron. Also, the fund is equally weighted, which you can see in the top holdings. For the sectors, real estate is one of the largest, making up about a quarter of the fund, then consumer staples, utilities, financials, energy, and a handful of others. Jumping to the income, schd has a dividend yield of 4.3%, and that's paid quarterly, making it one of the highest here. And it has 10 years of consecutive dividend payments, 2 years of consecutive dividend growth, and a 5-year dividend growth rate of 1.2%. With that, it comes with an expense ratio of 0.7%, costing you $7 per $10,000 invested. As for the returns, it's had 5-year annual returns of 10.3% and annual returns of about 10% over the past decade. Even though SPY-D has one of the highest yields out of the group, I'm going to have to put this one as just a good dividend ETF, but it sits pretty close to a pass. While the yield is great because of the pretty basic filtering index, it ends up making it heavily exposed to real estate and some other sectors because it's only focused on high yields. This makes it lean more into interest rate sensitive stocks, less growth potential and diversification overall, and it also leans much more into mid-cap sized companies. I think it's a decent fund, but a combination of a REIT fund along with the dividend ETF I think would be better, but that's ultimately up to the investor. Next we have VYMI, the Vanguard International High Dividend Yield ETF. This fund tracks the FTSE All-World X US High Dividend Yield Index, which contains international stocks that are expected to have above-average dividend yields. The fund and index are very similar to VYM as it excludes non-dividend paying companies, it doesn't exclude REITs, and it picks the top 50% of stocks based on expected dividend yield. For the portfolio of VYMI, it has 1,532 stocks, with top holdings in Roche, Novartis, HSBC, Nestle, Toyota, Shell, and others. And the sectors it's exposed to are mostly financials, then industrials, energy, and the rest are spread out pretty evenly. VYMI has a dividend yield of 3.5% and it pays out quarterly. And it's on the higher end since international stocks have higher yields in general. The fund also has 9 years of consecutive dividend payments, 3 years of consecutive dividend growth, and a 5-year dividend growth rate of nearly 11%, so not bad at all. Like other Vanguard funds, it comes with the low expense ratio of 0.07%, costing $7 per 10K invested. Now, as of the last year or so, international stocks have been making a comeback, and VYMI has had 1 year total returns of well over 50%, which is pretty crazy. And over the last 5 years, annual returns of 12.5%, and annual returns of 10% over the last 10 years, so nice and steady. I'm going to have to put VYMI at the top as one of the best dividend ETFs. While this fund leans a bit more into financials, it's well diversified across a variety of international dividend-paying companies, and it has pretty great dividend metrics. On top of that, it's a great way to further diversify your portfolio by having exposure beyond just the US markets. 8th on our list is going to be HDV, the iShares Core High Dividend ETF. This fund tracks the Morningstar Dividend Yield Focus Index and invests in companies that provide high dividends and are financially stable. The index filters companies through some quality and financial health screens. Then the 75 companies with the highest dividend yields are going to be selected for the index. For HDV's portfolio, this fund has 75 stocks in total, with top holdings in Exxon, Chevron, Johnson & Johnson, AbbVie, Home Depot, and more, with the sector exposure mainly lying in consumer staples, energy, and healthcare. And while there is some spread here, energy and consumer staples are half of the fund, so just something to consider. For the income, HDV has a dividend yield of 2.9%, which is paid out every quarter. It also has 14 years of consecutive dividend payments and a 5-year dividend growth rate of 2.2%. For the cost, the expense ratio is 0.08%, costing $8 for every $10,000 invested. And performance-wise, HDV has had 5-year annual returns of around 15.5%, and annual returns of 10.5% over the last 10 years. For the ranking, this one was kind of tough, but I'm going to have to give a pass to HDV. This ETF has half of its weight in just its top holdings alone, and it's also pretty limited in the amount of stocks that it has. Along with that, I don't like that it leans pretty heavily into the cyclical energy stocks and the sector in general. Ultimately, I think there's many other great dividend funds that could replace this one in a portfolio. Next is schd, the Charles Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF. schd tracks the performance of the Dow Jones US Dividend 100 Index, which focuses on high-quality dividend stocks. And SHD's index screens stocks based on a few different criteria. Companies must have 10 years of consecutive dividend payments, a market cap of at least $500 million, and a minimum average daily trading volume of $2 million. Then there's further filtering that considers 5-year dividend growth rate, return on equity, indicated annual dividend yield, and more. The portfolio of SHD is made up of 104 holdings, with the top holdings in Chevron, United Health, ConocoPhillips, Merck, Coca-Cola, and Verizon. And for the sector exposure, we have healthcare, consumer defensive, energy, technology, and the rest spread in a few other sectors, making it pretty well balanced in its exposure and top holdings. Moving to the dividends, schd has a dividend yield of 3.4%, which is getting paid out quarterly. And it comes with 14 years of consecutive dividend payments and dividend growth, along with the 5-year dividend growth rate of 8.6%. And schd comes with a low fee of 0.6%, costing you $6 per $10,000 invested. For the performance, schd has had 5-year annual returns of 11% and annual returns of over 13% in the past 10 years. schd is a gold standard when it comes to dividend ETFs, so I have to put it in the best category. schd is a strong contender when it comes to dividend ETFs, thanks to the strategy that filters for high-quality dividend payers. This allows it to continue to maintain a great yield, dividend growth, and consistent returns throughout the years as it readjusts its portfolio to maintain those qualities every year through its reconstitution. This next fund is a sibling to schd, and that's schy, the Charles Schwab International Dividend Equity ETF. This fund tracks the Dow Jones International Dividend 100 Index, which focuses on non-US dividend-paying companies. The index of this fund filters the same way that schd does. 10 consecutive years of dividend payments, a market cap of at least $500 million, and a minimum average daily trading volume of $2 million. And the same additional filtering that considers 5-year dividend growth rate and other metrics. As for the portfolio of schy, this ETF has 138 holdings in total, with top holdings in companies like ENI, Total Energies, ENEL, GlaxoSmithKline, and more, while its sector exposure is in financials, communication, industrials, consumer staples, and energy, so it's a pretty well-balanced international fund. And for the income, schy has a dividend yield of 3.4%, which is paid out quarterly. And it has 4 years of consecutive dividend payments and dividend growth, and a 3-year dividend growth rate of 9.7%. The timeframes are short because this fund was created in April 2021, so it doesn't have that much history yet. The expense ratio, it comes in at 0.8%, costing $8 yearly per 10K invested. And for the returns, in the last year, it had total returns of about 46.5%, thanks to the recent uptrend in international stocks. And in the last 3 years, it's had annual returns of 15% and annual returns of just under 9% over the past decade. This brings me to the ranking where I'm going to put schy in the good group. It's still a somewhat new fund, so I'd like to see how it performs with some more time under its belt before I bump it up a level. But I do think it falls a little bit short in potential compared to other funds like vymi due to the limited amount of exposure to holdings that it has and the filtering criteria of schy that removes some names that have some potential to run up. This is something that also affects schd since they share the same screening process. Up next, we have fdvv, the Fidelity High Dividend ETF. This fund tracks the Fidelity High Dividend Index, which invests in mid and large cap high dividend paying companies that are expected to continue to pay and grow their dividends. The index filters from the largest 1,000 stocks, and it calculates a composite score based on a few different factors. This includes dividend yield, payout ratio, and dividend growth, and then the highest ranked stocks are selected and weighted by market cap. And there's a max of 10% for the portfolio allocation for international stocks. For FDVV's portfolio, this fund currently has 113 holdings, with top holdings of familiar names like Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, Broadcom, Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, and more. And for the sectors it's primarily exposed to, it includes technology, then financials, consumer discretionary, and consumer staples. So it leans a bit heavier into the big tech names, but still offers some exposure to more defensive sectors as well. For the dividends, FDVV has a dividend yield of just about 3%, which is paid every quarter. It also has 9 consecutive years of dividend payments, 1 year of consecutive dividend growth, and a 5-year dividend growth rate of nearly 11%. For the fees, it has an expense ratio of 0.15%, costing $15 for every 10K invested. And for the returns, FDVV has had 5-year annual returns of about 13% and annual returns of 12.5% since it was created almost 10 years ago in 2016. FDVV is a dividend fund that has a bit more inconsistency in its dividend growth, but that's going to be due to the holdings that it has. It leans much more into tech names compared to some other funds, but still manages to squeeze out a pretty nice yield. So while it's not as defensive as some other funds on this list, it does have some solid dividend payers and other names that have great growth potential. For that reason, this fund is going in the best category. The yield and performance of this fund are pretty top tier, But for those looking for a more defensive and resilient fund, it might be better to look into some others on this list. And if you want to learn about some other ETFs that are defensive in nature and also pay dividends, be sure to watch this video here on 7 of the best value ETFs in the market. Or if you prefer monthly dividend ETFs, I'll talk about the 9 best cover call ETFs in this video here. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Keep on investing, and I'll see you in the next one.